Beth Ganion, and I am the Transitional Housing Program Manager at Safe Passage. My previous title was Prevention Specialist, so I recently was promoted to Transitional Housing Program Director. My previous title, I basically went around and taught at the local schools and taught about child sexual abuse and how to protect yourselves and how to know who to go to for help and things like that. Really, really loved that job. But I'm really also excited to get back into some more direct client work as the Transitional Housing Program Manager. I will be running all of our long-term program. We have some apartments that people can live in. If they do really well in our shelter, our emergency shelter, or in our counseling program, they can apply for this long-term living. And a lot of these long-term programs have the ability to get Section 8 vouchers by the end of it from the Housing Authority of DeKalb. So it's just a really, really amazing program. I'm going to be sharing a PowerPoint with you all, which we have titled pretty much just DVSA 101. And basically, this is just kind of like the how-to of like, or not the how-to, but I guess the information about what domestic violence and sexual assault can do to someone's brain and kind of what it looks like when someone's in a domestic violence relationship. When I refer to DV, I mean domestic violence. And when I refer to SA, I mean sexual assault. Once again, Safe Passage is DeKalb County's only domestic violence and sexual assault crisis center. So we have lots of amazing services that we provide, which I have a whole slide on that at the end. So I will make sure to get to that. Samantha, could you remind me one more time how long I have till 7:10? Yes, 7:10. Okay, awesome. All right. So yes, once again, this is Domestic Violence and Sexual Assault 101. So why is this necessary? It's because we see so many survivors of either domestic violence or sexual assault experiencing lasting health consequences as a result of the trauma. So we oftentimes see post-traumatic stress disorder, we see depression, anxiety, and many different mental health consequences that last over a long period of time. And so our job at Safe Passage is to try and mitigate some of that trauma and try to help individuals come up with coping mechanisms and strategies in order to mitigate some of that trauma that we do see very commonly when someone experiences DV or SA. So domestic violence is a pattern of coercive tactics used by an abuser to gain and maintain power and control over their victims. So the biggest thing about this, I would say, the big idea for domestic violence is that it's power and control. Someone is doing domestic violence on purpose. It's not something that they do on accident. It's very calculated, and it kind of goes in a cycle. So there are many different kinds of abuse that we can see in a domestic violence relationship. And this is where it also kind of ties over with sexual assault, because there is sexual abuse, which can happen in a domestic violence relationship. There's physical abuse, which is like that hitting, kicking, punching that we tend to think of. But there's also maybe if they punch walls, kick in doors, use their size to intimidate you, or maybe they brandish weapons and show weapons around you. They're not physically hurting you, but they're using physical objects and size and strength to intimidate you. That is still physical abuse. Or maybe if they destroy your objects that you care about and love, things like that. There's also verbal, emotional, and mental abuse. Those are kind of under one category, but those are things like belittling, putting someone down, yelling, screaming, swearing, threatening, anything like that. And a lot of times people think that the physical and sexual abuse is like the most serious kind of abuse, but we have a lot of survivors tell us that the bruises healed a lot faster than that emotional trauma they felt over time. Because if someone tells you that you're worthless and stupid and ugly enough times, you start to believe it, especially by the person who you think is supposed to love you the most. And of course, I do want to remind everybody that this is some pretty heavy topic. So please, at any point, go ahead and take a break. You can pause this, if you're watching the recording. Please take care of yourselves because this is a pretty heavy topic. But I just want to make sure everyone understands kind of the mental toll that domestic violence and sexual assault can take on a person and the resources out there to help you if you're going through this. Then there's also financial abuse, which is just maybe the person withholds economic goods, like they don't let you have transportation, they don't let you have a phone to contact people, maybe they don't let you have medications that you need, they don't let you know how much money's in the bank account, they don't let you have a job. The purpose of that, again, power and control. They get control over you if you have nowhere to drive, if you have no one you can call, if you don't have your own money. That's another layer of control. And then, of course, there's technological abuse. This is a new category as of the past 15, 20 years. Basically, people will harass other individuals online, track them, stalk them, all those different kinds of things. It's very much popular. We see it a lot with teen dating violence. And as with financial abuse, we see that more with adults. So you can see it really in any relationship, either of those two. Now, really quickly, I'm going to go over the cycle of violence. And so I have this little emoji chart here. And we typically see the cycle of violence in almost every single domestic violence relationship we come across. And so you maybe start in the honeymoon phase. You have the heart-eyed emoji. And we're all familiar with the honeymoon phase. It's something that happens normally in relationships. But I like to say in an abusive relationship, the honeymoon phase is like times 10. So it's really intense. They're constantly talking to you, showering you with love and compliments, lots of gifts, lots of quality time together. And at the same time, they're also going to try and move the relationship really fast. So they're going to try and get you committed really quickly, maybe want to move in together right away, maybe want to get engaged right away, maybe want to have a child together right away. So the goal of that is to really hook you in and make it harder for you to leave. And then we have kind of this wide-eyed emoji, this kind of scared looking emoji. And that's the tension building phase. So basically that is where a lot of people will say it's like walking on eggshells, or maybe they're like on thin ice. I'm sure we've heard that terminology before. But basically that just means that there's tension. They can tell something's about to happen. The survivor of the violence is just trying to do everything they can not to upset their partner. But inevitably, we get to this angry emoji face, and that's the blow up. It can be any form of any abuse we talked about here today. It could be physical, emotional, sexual, financial, technological, or it can be a combination of some of these different forms of abuse. And then after that, we have kind of our sad emoji that we have right here at the bottom. And that's the apology phase. And basically the individual is just going to say, oh, I'm so sorry. You know, that's not me. I just had a really bad day at work. You know that's not, and I had trauma in my childhood. So basically they're going to do everything they can to apologize and get you not to leave, right? They're going to say, you can change me, or I can change, or this has never happened before, or you know that I really love you, this just happens sometimes. And then the cycle begins again. We go back to honeymoon phase and everything's all right. And the thing about this is that love shouldn't hurt. That's one of kind of our tagline and slogans, that love should never hurt you. And a lot of individuals don't leave because they say, oh, well, the honeymoon phase, that's the real part of the relationship. These blow-ups, they just happen sometimes, right? All relationships have bumpy roads, but that's not really true. Relationships do have healthy conflict. Healthy conflict is a great thing. But instances of abuse does not happen in relationships. It should not happen. And so this cycle of violence, it happens over and over and over again. And because there's the I'm sorry and the honeymoon phase, that's how the person stays. That's how they get the person to stay. And then they build up this power and control over another person. So that's why it's really, really hard for individuals to leave, because a lot of times they don't even realize that they're in an abusive relationship, right? They think that, oh, you know, these blow-ups just happen sometimes, but other times we're really, really good, because abusive relationships aren't abusive all the time. So that's kind of the basics of domestic violence, kind of how the cycle works. I think it's really important for everyone to know that, because like I said, it's hard to tell if you're in an abusive relationship sometimes. Abusers can be very sneaky and very manipulative. And so sometimes it's hard for us to tell, especially when we kind of have those rose-colored glasses where we want to believe that the person who we really love loves us back really well. You know, we want to believe that. So that's kind of the basics of that. So this is, I already went through all of this. Just again, these are, and you can always pause the recording and read this through, but I kind of already went through all of these. Digital abuse, again, I went through that, so you can always pause the PowerPoint or pause the presentation if you're watching it later on and take a read on that. So something I really think is important to bring up is domestic violence strangulation. That is one of the most dangerous forms of violence that we see in domestic violence relationships. I'm not going to get too in detail about this, but I want individuals to know that if your partner has strangled you in the past, your risk of being killed by them is 10 times higher. When someone starts strangling someone else, that is the ultimate form of control. They're controlling your very breath. And strangulation is one of the most lethal forms of domestic violence. Unconsciousness can occur within seconds and death within minutes. And even if you've ever become unconscious before, but you still live, brain damage can happen very, very quickly. And it sometimes takes weeks to show up. Sometimes it takes weeks and weeks before someone starts feeling those symptoms of brain damage. So it's really, really important that individuals who have suffered from strangulation, especially to the point of unconsciousness, seek medical attention right away. It is a really, really deadly form of domestic violence. So this kind of talks about how emotional violence is actually very, very serious. And there was this whole campaign, and you can look it up later, of course, the Maybe He Doesn't Hit You campaign. And I don't think that that's gendered. I want everyone to know that domestic violence and sexual assault can come from any gender, any age, any religious affiliation, any ethnicity. It's not just from males, right? But I thought this campaign was very interesting because it talks about how sometimes we don't all experience the physical violence of domestic violence, but a lot of individuals experience just that emotional violence, and we need to take it just as seriously as every other form of violence that I had on that list. So again, you can look into that later. I just want to make sure I get through everything in time, but if you ever want to look that up, it's the Maybe He Doesn't Hit You hashtag. It's very interesting. A lot of people share a lot of stories, and I think it's an interesting thing to look into. So again, why don't people just leave these situations? So there's lots of reasons why people don't just leave. Actually, the danger part, so I'll kind of go through each one, but it's actually when a person leaves an abusive relationship, it is the most dangerous time. Because typically the abuser goes, oh, well, I've nothing to lose now. So the first year after leaving an abusive relationship is the most dangerous time. Again, that's why we have resources like Safe Passage. Our location is confidential, and individuals will come to our shelter when they're leaving, and we have heightened security and things like that, and lots of support. Because when you leave an abusive relationship, it's very, very dangerous. Also, again, people sometimes lack the resources. Maybe they weren't allowed to have a job for 20 years. They don't have a car, they don't have a phone. They don't know how much money's in the bank account. Their partner won't let them know. Maybe they have children with that individual. That makes things a little messy, right? I mean, for those of you who have children, a lot of people would do anything for their kids, even sometimes stay in a relationship that's unhealthy. But a lot of times we see that even if the abuser is only hurting the partner and not the children have lasting consequences, especially mental health consequences from that. Children are smart. They know what's going on. Even if it's behind closed doors, kids know. You know, kids kind of have this interesting intuition on these things. So it's really, really important that we also seek services for our kids, especially if they've seen stuff like this or know about stuff. We also have children's counselors at Safe Passage. It's really, really important that we know that kids know. They know what's going on. Even if they aren't firsthand experiencing some of that abuse, they do know what's going on. Sometimes religion, right? Like if you got married, sometimes religious affiliations are not super keen on the idea of divorce. Gender norms, isolation, there's a lot of shame and stigma also around this topic. And also a lot of people think it's not going to happen again, right? That cycle of abuse, right? Like, oh, this was a one-time thing, or, oh, they promise it won't happen again. And so that cycle is really keeping them there. So those are a couple reasons, and there are many, there's lots of reasons people don't, but that's just a couple of the big ones that we tend to see over and over and over again. So there are some really unique barriers for LGBTQIA+ folks. So sometimes there's that lack of community support. So family, friends, the workplace, community groups are even those actively hostile communities. Sometimes they don't have family members that accept them, that have kicked them out of the family, and they have this lack of support of people to go to, which can be really, really hard when you're trying to leave an abusive relationship and need that support. Or there is also forced outing as a tool of control. So the partner in the relationship can say, oh, you're not out to your workplace, well, I'll out you and you get fired, or I'll out you to the community and no one will talk to you. So that's another kind of power and control tactic that individuals use. There's also a lot of pressure to not report in the community, because since the community is not well taken by a lot of individuals, and I myself am a part of the community, and it's really, really hard because you don't want to give the community a bad name. You don't want to say, oh, well, we don't want LGBTQIA+ individuals to look like they're in abusive relationships, which everybody, every demographic has abusive relationships. So, you don't deserve to get hurt for the sake of the community, but that is another pressure on somebody to not talk about this. Also, fewer people recognize violence as intimate partner violence. So a lot of people will see this violence happening and not because it's two men together or it's two women together. People won't recognize that as intimate partner violence because they're not seeing that relationship as an intimate partner relationship. And also helping professionals may be uneducated at best or hostile at worst. There's a lot of stigma around LGBTQI+ individuals, especially seeking any form of care, right? There's a lot of fear about helping professionals understanding. I know Safe Passage, we have specific brochures that talk about how we can help LGBTQI+ folks, and we have a lot of trainings, but not every place does that. And so I understand the fear behind that. But if you ever need resources from Safe Passage and you're LGBTQIA+, we have very specific training and understanding for those folks. So that's really important to understand that there's some very specific barriers for this community. So let me see here. Red flags of abuse. There are some pretty stark red flags that you can see in the beginning of a relationship. I kind of talked about this already, where the honeymoon phase is going to be really extreme. It's going to be a lot of intensity, and they're going to try and move the relationship really quickly. But sometimes it's changes in behavior or personality. Lack of privacy. They want to see everything you're doing on your phone. They want to know who you're talking to. They want to know where you are. They constantly call you or text you wondering where you are. Maybe you feel constantly on edge. Like I said, you're starting to feel that tension building phase, maybe that walking on eggshells. In a relationship where you truly love and care about somebody and they love and care about you, you should not feel constantly on edge. Now, like I said, there's healthy conflict sometimes. That's important. It's important to have conflict because we're all different people, and it's important to be able to have some conflict sometimes, but you should not feel constantly like you are walking on edge. That is not, that's not a good thing to feel. Physical injuries. Now this is more if you're noticing maybe a friend is in a relationship that might be kind of unhealthy, or a family member. If you notice some physical injuries, or maybe you notice that they're checking in with their partner all the time. They keep saying, oh, I'm sorry, I have to keep texting my partner. Or you notice while you're out with them that their phone rings 50 times. Or maybe that they're not allowed to make decisions. Like they have to call their partner over and over again to say, hey, can I do this? Hey, can I do this? Hey, can I do this? So those are some things that you may notice in others. Again, that change in behavior or personality, again, all of those things can be ones that you see in other people as well. So every relationship is different, and every abusive relationship is different too. But if you're concerned about yourself, a friend, or anything like that, our hotline is right down there at the bottom of the screen, and I'll have it up again. But you can call our hotline just to ask questions. We also offer counseling services for those who have family members in abusive relationships to try and help cope with that, because it's not just hard being in the relationship, but it's hard watching someone you love go through that. So just keep that in mind. Sorry, I keep having to move my little boxes of faces, you know, that around. Okay, so sexual abuse. I'm going to get into this now. Again, one more reminder that this is a tough topic. So if you need to pause it and take care of yourselves, make sure that you are taking care of yourself mentally. I want to make sure that, you know, I give that trigger warning to everybody that this is a tough topic to talk about. So sexual abuse is a spectrum of behaviors, including harassment and demeaning language and physical assault. So most of the time when we think of sexual assault or sexual abuse, people think of like the big scary word of rape, right? But the thing is it's also those harassing behaviors. Like maybe people make sexual jokes around you that make you feel uncomfortable, or maybe they pressure you for nude photos, or they send you nude photos you didn't want to see, things like that. That is also sexual abuse. It's that unwanted sexual contact that is not just physical, but it can be online or said or spoken. And like I said, with emotional abuse versus physical abuse, with sexual abuse, those verbal things that are said are just as serious as that physical assault. So sexual abuse by the numbers, more than 1 in 3 women experience sexual violence involving physical contact during her lifetime. So if you care about 3 women in your life, more than 3 women, I'm assuming that you probably know someone in your life that you care about that has gone through this. And they may never tell you, you may never know who that person is. But it's really important that we understand that we probably know someone who's gone through this and that we have some understanding and caring there. And also, this is not just a gendered discussion, not just a gendered problem. It's not a women's problem, right? Because nearly 1 in 4 men have experienced sexual violence involving physical contact during his lifetime. And I also like to point out that 1 in 2 non-binary or transgender individuals have experienced sexual abuse involving physical contact in their lifetime. And that's a pretty, whenever I say that and hear that, I'm always in disbelief that it's 1 in 2, like that is a crazy large number. And really, really, again, another barrier for that community, because it is, they're seen as a vulnerable community, right? And so when someone is vulnerable, they're more likely to be taken advantage of by somebody. And so that's really, really hard. And we need to make sure we're protecting that community and spending our time protecting communities that need our help. So I do not have time to share this video. But I will go ahead and basically you can look up this title. It's a very, very, it's a great video. It is, I cry every time I see it though. It is sad. It's basically women reading survivor stories and then getting to meet those survivors. So it's a very emotional video. So make sure that you have the emotional energy if you decide to watch that. So here again are some unique barriers for LGBTQIA+ folks when we're talking about sexual abuse. There is the hypersexualization that we see. 75% of bi women reported sexual violence other than rape at some point in their lives. So we often see this hypersexualization in the community. I know we see it a lot at Pride events. We see it a lot at on TV. The media really portrays LGBTQIA+ folks as hypersexualized. And so then they receive a lot of abuse because everyone is like, oh, well, if you are in that community, that means that you want sex all the time. And that's just not the case. Also, sexual assault often taken less seriously or treated as a joke for that community. And sexual assault is serious for anybody. It doesn't matter what community they're in, or, you know, if they're Black or white or you know, Asian Pacific Islander, like it doesn't matter who you are, sexual assault is serious. You know, it's something that we need to take seriously for anyone in any community. Also, there's some intersections between violence and oppression. So a lot of times sexual assault or sexual abuse will be used as a tool for hate crime. It's often used as a tool for hate crime. And that is really a problem that we're seeing. And so then makes this population more vulnerable in that sense. A lot of pressure not to report. Again, this doesn't happen in our community. That is a really big pressure. And so we need to make sure that we have these resources for individuals, especially those confidential resources, right? Everything for victim services for safe passage is confidential. We are mandated reporters, so I will say that if we get something that we need to mandate report, of course we have to report that. Or if someone says they're going to hurt themselves or others, we have to report that. But other than that, we are not allowed to say anything about anybody at all. So we are confidential at safe passage, and I think that helps with this fear of reporting and hurting the community. And again, helping professionals may be uneducated at best or hostile at worst. We see that over and over again. I think that we all just have to try our best to educate and create a more tolerable place for individuals to go from helping professionals. So really quickly, I want to talk about rape culture in our society. Rape culture is an attitude in society that sexual assault is inevitable and normal. So the you should smile more, and people just make this stuff up for attention, or it's just a joke, things like that. It's really important that we understand that sexual assault or sexual abuse is not normal and should not be happening to people. The boys will be boys thing, and hashtag not all men. We all need to take a stand against sexual violence in our community. And what we have to do is call people out. If we make it unacceptable to be doing things like sexual harassment and sexual assault, it will stop happening. It's this locker room talk, people making jokes about this stuff all the time, saying people made stuff up, that's perpetrating that rape culture, perpetrating that this is normal. And I also want you to know that typically less than 2% of the time people lie about being sexually assaulted. I know we hear about it on the news all the time, but that's because of agenda setting in the media. The media is picking what stories they want you to see because it gets them more views and likes. So less than 2% of the time people lie about being sexually assaulted or sexually abused. So I'd rather take that less than 2% chance and believe somebody than to have not given someone support. So please, please, please just believe people. Don't blame them. Don't victim blame them. You know, it doesn't matter what they were wearing. It doesn't matter what they were drinking. It doesn't matter what they were doing, right? No one deserves to be sexually assaulted for what they were wearing, what they were doing, what they were drinking, right? So that is kind of how we end that rape culture. And that's how we get it to be less people are sexually assaulted and sexually abused. Because 1 in 3, 1 in 4, and 1 in 2 is big. Those are big statistics and big numbers. And that doesn't include all the people who don't report, which, because there's a lot of stigma around it, a lot of people don't report. So just keep that in mind. So how to help? Don't sexually assault anybody, woohoo, you know, like that is something that I think is really, really important. And if you ever make someone uncomfortable, because we've all made people uncomfortable before on accident, just take accountability for those actions and try and learn from that. And understand and value consent in relationships and hookups, right? It's really important we understand consent. Please, please, please ask people before you do anything. So consent is freely given, reversible, informed, enthusiastic, and specific. All right. And also 17 is the age of consent in Illinois, so keep that in mind. I don't have a ton of time for the rest of this, so I just want to talk about our services really, really quickly. So we have advocacy, so we have legal and medical advocacy. So if you ever need an order of protection in the courts, need help with a divorce case, we have legal advocates that basically, they're not lawyers, but they can help walk you through the process and help you fill out paperwork and go to court with you. We also have medical advocates that show up to the hospital 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So if someone is in the hospital due to SA or DV, we have medical advocates that are called by the hospital and have to be there within 45 minutes of the call. There's also counseling. There's individual counseling, group counseling, family counseling, and children's counseling. Again, that is all free and confidential. We also have an emergency shelter and long-term housing. That's me. I take care of the long-term housing. And we have our crisis line. It is a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week crisis line. That is the number right there. We also now have a text line. So if you go on our website, you can always look that up. Our website is, you just look up Safe Passage into DeKalb, it'll pop right up. Prevention education, which is what I'm doing right now and transitioning out of. We have education and outreach about services, and we also go into schools and teach about healthy relationships and child sexual abuse. There's also abuse intervention services. That is for individuals, typically court ordered for individuals who have perpetrated abuse before. A lot of times we see that they just didn't know what a healthy relationship was supposed to be. So we help teach about that. Typically that is court ordered. That is our only service that is not free. All of our victim-centered services or survivor-centered services are free. But the court-ordered ones, because the government does not give us too much funding on that, we do charge for that service. So please stay in touch. That is my old supervisor's information, so please do not go off of that. Sam has all the information of my new supervisor, Lisa Shelton. So that will be lshelton@safepassagedv.org. And it's the same extension. So Lisa Shelton will be extension 107. But thank you all for listening to me jibber jabber on. So please,
Wonderful.
If
Yeah,
anyone
thank
has
you,
any
Beth.
questions. Yeah.
That was a really great PowerPoint. It was definitely powerful. I'm nodding my head from experience or from seeing others going through this, and all of us are nodding our heads. And like you said, if you love 3 women or 4 men, one of them has been through this. And I just wanted to make everybody aware that we do have cards here that have updated hotline and the text number. These are available anytime here at the library. They're upstairs on the 2nd floor in adult services. Come get one. Even if you don't need one, you never know who might that you know. We also do have some safe passage pamphlets here, and we do have in both bathrooms safe passage tear-offs, and we do see them being used. So we're very happy that we have them in there and they're being provided. Also, we had a book club with Safe Passage with Chanel Miller's memoir, Know My Name. Besides that book, I know we do have another one I'm just going to highlight real quick for you. This is Whatever Gets You Through. It is 12 Survivors on Life After Sexual Assault. This is just one of the many books that we have here that might be helpful for you. So next up, we do have Briana Doden. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly? Okay. She is a licensed clinical professional counselor. She's working at a juvenile state prison, providing individual, group, family, and crisis services to juveniles. She had previously worked as a therapist at an adult prison for several years prior, and she also had worked at Safe Passage many years ago as a counselor for domestic violence survivors. And so what really drew me to her is she also has a candle company, MXVII. She makes soy candles designed to inspire self-care and intentionality so that you can live your best life. So Briana, take it away.
Hello, everybody. So like Sam said, I am an LCPC, a licensed clinical professional counselor. I've been, with the exception of my time at Safe Passage working with survivors of domestic violence, I have spent the majority of my career working with either court mandated people for domestic violence programming or working in correctional facilities. So I was in an adult facility for a couple of years, providing therapy services to incarcerated men. And I'm now in a juvenile state prison doing the same thing. So there are, I think, 5 facilities in Illinois. So our facility has only male juveniles, and we provide individual, group, family, and crisis services, as well as other kind of programming. So a lot of the focus of our work with these youth is really heavily trauma related. 99.999% of these kids have come from really, really horrible backgrounds, a ton of trauma from like extremely early ages. The majority, 9 out of 10 of our youth are gang affiliated. So the amount of violence that they have participated in, experienced, witnessed is like really profound. So the majority of our services are kind of tailored around that, kind of going back to the educational piece with domestic violence and sexual assault. A lot of our work, there's a big educational piece related to like the biological effects of trauma and different symptoms that we see these kids demonstrate like every day. Because a lot of them just don't know. They don't know that it's not normal, that they've been hypervigilant and on edge since they were 6 and all of these things. So most of them are exactly how you would expect a traumatized adolescent to be. So they are very reactive, like I said, very hypervigilant, navigating a lot of the like gang violence and issues like that. So we focus a lot on trauma because they aren't usually with us very long. Our work is kind of more focused on like coping in the moment and throughout their period of time that they are incarcerated, but also being able to utilize those coping skills when they leave, and being able to recognize the symptoms that they experience from their trauma and being able to work through that to a degree that is safe and responsible, because we don't obviously want to open those cans of worms and then let them out. And then maybe they don't access services or it doesn't translate. And we don't want them like that. So we focus a lot on that. We focus a lot on like using a lot of cognitive based stuff, just kind of getting them to recognize irrational thoughts and their distorted thinking and beliefs and how that translates to the decisions they make. A lot of times, I mean, similar to the experiences of people in domestic violence relationships or sexual assault situations, kids who've been traumatized their whole lives have a lot of very similar symptoms. So for a lot of these kids, they have never really had an opportunity to express their feelings or get support for their feelings. They haven't really had a place that was safe to have those things acknowledged and worked through and supported. So in the setting we're in, we really focus on the trauma piece, kind of just challenging their distorted thinking and being able to provide like an empathetic and supportive, safe space for them to whatever degree we can, because pretty sure the majority of them have not had that before. So depending on different kind of state facilities do things a little bit differently. In our facility, we have a level system. So based on when the youth come in for their intake, we go through all of their information, and they're assigned kind of like a level of severity in terms of their mental health symptoms, and that kind of directs them to what type of services they might need. Both facilities that I've worked at have had a designated unit for adults or juveniles who have like pretty severe mental health issues. So in most facilities, adult and juvenile, there will be a separate facility for those individuals. So they're able to get more support and they're able to kind of have a separate space from the general population. So usually they're offered like various groups throughout the week, individual therapy at least once a week, but that can vary obviously depending on the situation. All facilities have mental health staff, but in the event that we're not there, usually most like state facilities will have their lieutenants or whatever the equivalent of that is trained in like mental health crisis response. So if mental health is not there to respond to a crisis, they'll be able to address that. And then usually a mental health professional will follow up the next day. Most facilities have mental health coverage every day. but obviously not like overnight and things like that. So they have access to crisis services, literally 24/7, groups pretty consistently throughout the week, individual therapy throughout the week. Obviously with juveniles, family therapy is a thing that does not happen in adult, or at least not that I've seen. The dynamics of that will depend just based on kind of like what is beneficial and what is possible. A lot of these youth are also in DCFS custody, so then there's barriers there too. So those are pretty much the span of mental health services in adult really and juvenile facilities. There is overall a really big push to address the mental health like needs of people who are incarcerated. So I think all facilities are pretty aware of that and responsive to that. Obviously, there's a lot of limitations and kind of barriers in terms of like sifting out the most beneficial and conducive way to do that. There are times where those services are not utilized the way that they're supposed to be used. So those things kind of have to be, we just have to be really careful about it. And then in terms of reentry, I can at least speak, I didn't really deal with that as much on the adult side, but from the juvenile side, 99.9% of youth get referrals to mental health when they leave the facility. Most of the time, because they aren't incarcerated very long, those referrals are really important because they would have just really started the process while they were detained. So they will always have to at least get an evaluation when they get back into the community. And our facilities, the juvenile facilities, now offer an option for youth to continue meeting with their therapist from the facility on the phone when they leave. So considering the nature of the situation, there are some limitations and barriers with that too. But that was kind of to bridge the gap between when they leave and when they get into services, because there are such ridiculous wait lists. And we don't want them without services in the meantime. So yeah, it's overall, I think it's something that's being addressed and really being looked at within these facilities. And it's kind of heading in the right direction. But yeah, I think it's kind of a tricky environment for that, but that push is definitely there. So that's kind of the gist of what those services look like for juveniles especially, but also adults.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Briana. I do want to mention that we do have a workbook here, one for men, one for women, for incarcerated persons. So if you have a family member, child, friend that you know that is currently incarcerated, we have these here. They're always available in reference. We can help you make copies of those and you can send those to them. They're intentional life planners, so that when they're going through reentry, hopefully they have a little bit more of a plan. And I really like your note, Briana, that now they're having the people who are working with them in mental health in jail talk to the kids until they can get into those professional services, because that's what I was wondering when I was hearing you say that, was how many of them actually make it there. Maintaining that and giving yourself that space, especially if you're not in a safe environment, that's really hard to do. So I'm really glad to hear that. And also just to note that Sycamore Library does donate to the jail. They're just behind us. Part of mental health is being able to read and educate yourself, especially for you to go into reentry, right? If you want to become a positive member of the community, you need those resources. So we're providing what we can. Mostly some fiction, nonfiction. We have some crossword books that we're ready to donate. So we're happy and I'm looking forward to doing more for that community. Now, I'll be speaking on behalf of Megan Wickland from Ben Gordon Center. It's the Northwestern Medical Center. So I'm just going to share. And I apologize, my light turned off. It's motion centered and I'm blocking it. So if it turns off and I wave, sorry about that. Okay. All right, are you thumbs up? Okay, perfect. Okay, so we just went over Beth here. There we go, and thank you, Briana. So we're going to talk a little bit about mental health for persons currently in recovery and or with suicidal thoughts. This is what the Ben Gordon Center does. I wanted to show the crises hotlines right now first, just so if you don't have a lot of time, you can pause the screen, during the recording. I'll show these again at the end, just in case. I'm going to pull up my sheet again. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to do this. So the Ben Gordon Center, it takes a multidisciplinary approach to treating a wide variety of mental and behavioral health concerns for adults. Individual, family, and group counseling, as well as psychiatry, are offered at each of their locations. Services are offered such as case management, community support team, group therapy, individual therapy, psychiatry, vocational services, and peer support. The living room is a comfortable, non-clinical space for individuals experiencing overwhelming symptoms due to life circumstances. So we have Ben Gordon's crisis hotline there. We have the National Crisis Text Line. It's a 24/7 text line where a live trained crisis counselor receives a text and responds to any sort of crisis from their secure online platform. The volunteer crisis counselor will help you move from a hot moment to a cool moment. Next is the Illinois Warm Line. I learned a lot when I did some research here. It's an opportunity in Illinois for anyone ages 12 and up to receive support by phone. Support specialists are professionals who have experienced recovery in their own lives. They have been trained in recovery support, mentoring, and advocacy, and they're ready to listen and support you. The Warm Line, it's not technically a crisis hotline, but it's a source of support as you recover or help a family member to recover. Suicide hotline. If you or a loved one are experiencing a mental health crisis, you may call the 24-hour National Suicide Prevention Line. It's 1-800-273-8255 or 273-TALK. Caring staff will connect you with the closest possible crisis center in your area. And I did put up again the Safe Passage hotline and Safe Passage text line. Okay, the Ben Gordon Center. So you saw they have addiction treatment services, the living room, Discovery House, and child and adolescent services. Tell you a little bit more about those. The addiction treatment services, it's outpatient treatment services offered to meet unique needs of adolescents ages 12 and up and adults struggling with addiction. Co-occurring mental health disorders and other issues directly linked to addiction are also a focus of care. The living room, I have some pamphlets here as well, so you can always stop by the second floor. The living room here, we have a little more information. It is a comfortable and non-clinical space for individuals experiencing overwhelming symptoms due to life. The goal of the program is to provide a safe environment in which guests can resolve crises without more intense intervention. And the Discovery House, it's a recovery home for women 18 plus in recovery from addiction, providing a cozy, structured environment to help them heal, maintain sobriety, and move forward in life. There is a lot more information here in our Ben Gordon Health Center pamphlet at the library, so stop on by for that. They also have child and adolescent services. Individual, family, and group counseling can help children 17 and under experiencing problems at home or at school. They do offer supportive services for youth ages 21 and younger, hit the button, who have experienced a behavioral health crisis. Individuals can elect to receive case management, therapy counseling, psychiatry, and referral and linkage support. I do have the information here. They're located right here in DeKalb. Right now I have a little bit more information. I have my top bar. I know these bars are invisible to you guys, but they're in our way all the time. Mental health resources for marginalized groups. This was really what I wanted to focus on today. We're BIPOC persons, AAPI, LGBTQIA+, veterans, disabled or differently abled individuals, and elderly and caregivers and persons with dementia. So I have a little bit of combination here. The first slide, this is some of our library books. I have a lot more, as you can see behind me. The first one is the Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. My Grandmother's Hands. Back here, these are all available for checkout right now. An Afro-Indigenous History of the United States. Here, I will be sending you guys this information as well to anybody who's registered. And Healing Racial Trauma. We've got the Auntie Sewing Squad Guide to Mask Making, Radical Care, and Radical Justice. We have From the Ashes. This is a memoir by Jessie Thistle. This long thread, this one looks really interesting. It's Women of Color on Craft, Community, and Connection. I really believe a part of mental health is connecting within your community and feeling like you're not alone. So I'm excited that we have this book. And then this one, this is Yoke, My Yoga of Self-Acceptance. And these are just some of what we've got here. I wanted to put up some of the online resources I found. I can send you this PDF. These are all hyperlinks. We have the NAMI, which is National Alliance on Mental Illness. The KDK is the Kendall South, DeKalb, and Kendall Companies BIPOC support group. That is a link. However, we have this up on our community board on the second floor. So we have all that information there for you. I have a link to BIPOC mental health resources, bystander intervention training, which comes through stopasianhate.org. So anybody can take that. And I think that's also really important, as Beth said in the first thing. How can you help? Don't sexually abuse people. How can you help as a bystander? Noticing things and doing some training. I also found this website for Asian Mental Health Collective. There's a Stop Asian Hate movement, Stop AAPI Hate Resources. That's a separate website, but still just as helpful. We had presenter Dr. Ada Chang come last year to talk about Not Quite, where she doesn't feel like she fit into a community. She'll be coming back this year for AAPI Heritage Month this May. She suggested some of these resources, so keep an eye out for our upcoming programs. And we also have anti-Asian racism resources for families, because also a big part of mental health is having support from your families and understanding. So I'm really glad to have that resource for you as well. We do have some library and online really quick, because we know Beth did touch upon this. Hyperlink to the Safe Zone Project for allies. I found another link. Human Rights Campaign has a wonderful list of mental health resources. The Trevor Project, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with. This is more for youth. Books here. Headcase. This is LGBTQ writers and artists on mental health. This is just many people, so there's no by a name. This one, we started, you see all these are new books because this is really important to us to continue to develop. Parenting Your LGBTQ+ Teen. And then a mother's memoir of raising her transgender daughter called How to Be a Girl. Real quick, we've got for veterans, we just have a couple I pulled here. We have a book called Flashback, PTSD, Suicide, and the Lessons of War. We've got another one, which is also really important, Loving Someone with PTSD. Good mental health is feeling like you can also support those around you that need that help. So we tried to have a lot of books also for people to help others going through things. And I do have a link to the VA office website. I looked through, it's wonderful. Their mental health resources has lists. Each one of those different things you might be going through, substance abuse, addiction, any recovery, they each have their own webpage and current resources that you can look through that. Also, you'll be able to find your local VA area in Rockford or Aurora on there as well. For differently abled individuals, we've got Disability Visibility, First Person Stories from the 21st Century, also one of our new books. We also have Demystifying Disability, and this one's for allies. What to know, what to say, and how to be an ally. And like, as I mentioned, being an ally is extremely important for everybody's mental health. And a new one that's really interesting is Rugged Access for All, the complete guide to push hiking America's trails. Something you don't think about if you are a person like me who doesn't have any mobility issues. I didn't even think, how can somebody in a wheelchair go through this area that I'm hiking without a problem? So there's a wonderful book here we have on that. And then I also wanted to be sure to mention, I have RAMP. We're doing some partnerships with them in the future. They're local here in DeKalb, and it's all around. RAMP is Services and Advocacy for Individuals with Disability. We do have the DeKalb County ones just on First Street in DeKalb, so keep an eye out for more work there. I actually reached out to them when I had an outdoor program in the winter on our patio, and we had a step. However, there was no handicap access. I asked them if I could borrow a ramp, which costs hundreds of dollars. They let me borrow for free, no problem. So they're very excited to help everybody out. And the last thing I'm going to talk about is elderly people and caregivers and persons with dementia. We've had a partnership with Alzheimer's Association for about 8 months now. I have a link there as well. We do have live watch parties that happen monthly. We just had one on healthy aging and how to grow your own butterfly garden. We have an upcoming one that also includes how to make a special treat for 4th of July. We have an Understanding Alzheimer's and Dementia DVD. I talked to Joe Landmichael. He's our partner there. He created these DVDs for us to test out. And we're happy to say that people have been enjoying them and checking them out. These are available at any time here. And we do also have the online caregiver support group that actually would have started at 6 p.m. tonight. It's the second Thursdays. You can register through our Eventbrite. It's sycamorelibrary.eventbrite.com. That's put on from a trained caregiver through Alzheimer's Association. So it's caregivers of any kind that can get together and find that support they need. A couple online resources. We have Dementia Friends, Alzheimer's Association, and Elder Care. We do have also second Thursdays of every month. Elder Care Services of DeKalb County comes. You can grab this pamphlet here. And they talk about Medicare, Medicaid. It's walk-in from 1 to 2 p.m. She had 6 people come in last month. So we're very grateful for Sherry Hansen to come here and help us out. Well, some local support, behavioral health at the NAMIKDK.org. That's the National Health Alliance I mentioned earlier. We have BIPOC support group. I give you that specific link. There's walk-in support at Ben Gordon. I also just put up the Al-Anon. There's a way to get connected to local resources. I found this through Safe Passage website, so thank you for putting that up. It's 211.org. And then I did have Megan Wickland from Ben Gordon share a link for you to create your own support plan. Once again, I have the crisis line information here. Feel free to pause this. And then anytime you have any more questions, reach out to me. I know I went really fast on the book titles. We can get these on hold for you. If you're at all uncomfortable with coming up to us and you can't remember, we have started to create Let's Talk About bookmarks. We have Let's Talk About Mental Health. Let's talk about LGBTQ+ issues, race issues, and COVID-19. These are up as you walk up the stairs in adult services, available for you to grab anytime with anonymity. Okay, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you so much for Beth and Briana today for bringing their unique experiences. I just have to mention before I leave that I have this delicious smelling candle in the background. It is from Briana's company. I'm not just saying it smells good. I've purchased 2 of them, and for our summer reading program, I will have some as gifts as well. So makes me feel really good. It's called Pain into Power. So I thought it was really perfect for today. So thank you. Once again, reach out if you have any questions. I'll provide you information for our new person that will be working with that Safe Passage. Beth, we will miss you. Thank you so much. All right, everybody, take care.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.